what's your GitHub account and tell me how you use it. Like that's my proxy for this stuff.
It's a land grab moment. And so we're staffed up a lot more on ops and systems than I think a lot of people would expect, or that would seem maybe prudent. But he's also like Salesforce certified. He's like deep in Salesforce, but he's also ripping apps in Cursor. Yeah, I built a deal desk bot on like a Thursday afternoon in like 15 minutes because I posted a LinkedIn post and I was like stood in Union Square and I like held a sign over my head and I was like, book a meeting with me and I'll pay you $1,000.
Welcome to the Stacked GTM podcast. I'm Andy Mowat from GTM Council, along with Noah Marks, my co-host. Today, we are diving deep again on another episode in our series on GTM Engineer with James Underhill. He runs GTM Ops at Profound, which is a rapidly growing company in the AEO, GEO space. Did I get that right, James?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. So I went on a walk yesterday and learned all the reasons I need to sign up for Profound right away. And James makes them tick. Before that, MongoDB. And I imagine, given the references I've had on you and the people have told us to talk to you, you know your stuff. So let's get to it.
Sure. Excited.
That's awesome. Maybe just for setting the stage, what's the scope of the team and what do you do? I think that always helps people. Like scope of company, scope of team, and how have you constructed your team would be really helpful to start.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, high level scope of company. Profound is a Series C company based in New York City. We're in a rapid growth phase, which actually makes it kind of hard to calibrate to actual phase. We've got about 30 AEs now. We want to finish the year at about 100. So it's like from a systems and ops perspective, I have to calibrate towards the first derivative, not like where we are today, but like the velocity of where you're going to be. And because it takes, an ops and systems structure to be able to scale an organism.
Yeah.
The kind of scope of the team is so I cover across basically I think of it as like the, if the company is the organism and the go-to-market, like muscle is the sales team, we're kind of like the fascia. So it's like the supportive muscle. So we're like the systems, like
Yep.
Salesforce, everything around there, or the ops and strategy, planning, capacity forecasting, we're go-to-market engineering, which we'll go deeper into. I also built the deployed engineering team. Support is like service support, and then also enablement.
I love that. By the way, I think Noah and I both really enjoy the fact that you're titled GTM Ops rather than RevOps. We've given up fighting that battle, but to me, RevOps 9 times out of 10 is a sales ops person trying to make them with a sexier title. But I think Noah and I believe the same thing. Like you've got, if I to understand that you've got the marketing, the CS, and the sales, you've got the ops systems and strategy for all three of those. Is that right, James?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's lots of models that you could put in place. I don't think there's like a wrong answer, but yeah, we're growing rapidly and just kind of figuring it out. But that's how we're structured now.
That's great. What does your GTM engineering team look like? Like, how many of those people are they? What is their skill set? And how do you see them kind of collaborating or eventually replacing your actual like no traditional RevOps team?
Yeah, so it's super interesting. I would say first of all, like what is go-to-market engineering? I think, Clay seemingly popularized the term. And I think in the context that they use it is probably different in the context that we use it and in that many other people. Think it's become a superset of the initial intent. So they came out with this tool that was, I think, primarily focused as a use case on building an outbound funnel. Uh, and we do that with our go-to-market engineering team. But I find that at this point, the name, with the proliferation of tools that we have access to, like basically Cloud Code, I think of our go-to-market engineering team. I'm like kind of want to rebrand them to like Applied AI because we don't exclusively work with go-to-market. We work across like the talent and people ops organization, the finance organization, and other teams. And the remit is basically figure out where we can build systems that complement people in doing their jobs and leverage the data that we have. And it could be something as simple as like, we use, for example, like a talent use case, we use a tool called Ashby for tracking,
Yep.
say a candidate, whatever system, I can't remember what the acronym is.
ATS.
ATS, yeah. So we've like created an abstraction of that, which is just like simpler to use and allows us to kind of query and understand what's going on with candidates for hiring managers that are hiring a lot of people. Um, but at like a more kind of meta level, there's a whole layer of data that the company has for like every internal and external interaction that being able to parse through and kind of create like the brain of the organism is like a whole other difficult technical problem to solve that I spent a lot of time thinking about. And so I think that's just kind of setting the stage. We can kind of go deeper in any of those, but I think the go-to-market engineer concept was powerful, but it's kind of just become like one, we have like a function that is focused on owning, top of funnel. And then we have
Yes.
other functions that are focused on embedding into different teams and using similar systems to make them more efficient. And then we also just have like a general like lean on uh how can we make every role focused on like the practitioners, not the go-to-market engineers, but the people who are doing that role. Like how can the person doing deal desk look more like a go-to-market engineer versus a traditional kind of ops person?
If I could retitle the GTM engineer term, and I think Clay, to their own credit, has been okay saying it's much broader than using our tool, which is great. But if I could retitle it, I'd almost call it like AI transformation, right? Like I want my team sitting with
Yeah.
the sales reps, understanding what their job process is, their workflow, and how do I automate as much of it out. Like if you if you could retitle what your team does that maybe is called GTM engineer, like what would you call those people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be transformation. It could be, I think it was just like, yeah, it depends if you wanted to title it, just thinking like in real time, like if you wanted to think about it in terms of outcomes or like what they use AI as a tool, but they
Mhm.
also use other tools. So it's
Yes.
just like I think even calling it like AI something is kind of, just a subset of what they do as well. It's almost like they're like a forward deployed engineer of sorts internally.
Yeah.
What I see this evolving to is it's it's the go-to-market ops role is not just about the go-to-market. You start off saying it's,
Sure.
talent and how do we work with the talent. The example I was using yesterday is, you could build the best sales plan in the world, but if finance doesn't have the budgets right and relinquishing those recs and talent isn't developing the pool of candidates to get in place, it doesn't matter what your sales plan is. You failed before you even started. And I think the value, this broader go-to-market focus is what our roles bring to the table, which is thinking through all of those things upstream and downstream that are dependent on that full system. So this AI GTM engineer transformational role is effectively just focusing on the broad system, but figuring out how to make it more effective and efficient. So it's a natural extension from what the role that you have. It's just functionally more on the efficiency and certainly grabbing information. You mentioned grabbing it out of the talent application and making it
Money.
more usable, right? It's more the action. Is that, am I thinking about the right way, the way that you're employing that role?
Yeah, as I'm thinking about it real time, it's like, is efficiency? Yeah, efficiency is for sure one of the goals. But it's also just being able to do things that we weren't able to do before.
I
Like when I
like
was at MongoDB, we do things today that we were not able to do at MongoDB with the tools and skills that we had on the team.
I one thing, I mean, I've seen this over and over again, which is you'll see like a amazing RevOps slash GTM engineer slash whatever, and they'll do it. They'll show the power of AI and GTM, and then eventually they'll end up taking over and owning AI transformation or call it
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
across the entire company. It sounds like you've done similarly. Is that the good
yeah.
way of
That it was
phrasing
a very I mean, I've been at Profound 9 months, but it feels like 10 years.
it?
Right. I think that was a very organic kind of transition. I hired our first, so I have a very talented practitioner and leader now, Edgar, uh, who I met because I posted a LinkedIn post and I was like still in Union Square and I like held a sign over my head and I was like, book a meeting with me and I'll pay you $1,000. And he like continued to outbound to me and he sent me all these plays and he eventually like sent me a cactus because I'm wearing my LinkedIn photos of fake. It's like an AI image of me as a cowboy. So he sent me a cactus like to the office. And so we met and I was like, oh, this kid's actually extremely talented. So Edgar started by doing the very traditional. We had hired a go-to-market like engineering, like a clay agency, basically to run our top of funnel. He took over for that. And then what he did, which I think is an excellent example of like how to be great in your role, is he saw all these gaps in our data, in our infrastructure, in our ability to leverage tools. And so he started, he basically, there was a tool that was very underutilized called Dust that we had. And he saw the potential that could be used as like a general platform to query knowledge across the company. And he started building agents that were designed for specific use cases across go-to-market and then for other teams as well. And I remember at one point I just had him and I was like, hey, can you just sit with the CS team? Just like get to know what these guys are doing and like help them. Like they just need to be more efficient. And within like a week, they were like, I don't know how we could do this job without Edgar. Like everything he's built is like so amazing. And it's just like the speed that he was able, just by being there in person with them and understanding their required capabilities, he was able to use infrastructure that we had to just like spin off tools very quickly. And then from there, it very organically spread to other teams across the org. Especially when you're a small company. I think at that point we were like 80 people.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, can we get, that's kind of similar to what we do. Can we get some of that? And then it
We get a
just,
little Edgar time. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
What dust is something I think we've heard on 3 or 4 of the episodes we've done so far.
Yeah.
I have a pretty good understanding of what it is, spent some time with our team, but can you just describe how you use Dust and what it does for you guys for the audience?
Yeah, I think Dust is, and I would say high level, tooling, you should get the right tooling stack that aligns to your use cases.
Yeah.
It's not a right or wrong answer, but Dust has been really helpful for us because it does a lot of out of the box things that you might need to do yourself that would be complicated in order to, well, use cases like you could use it for a lot of things. But what we use it for effectively is like out of the box, you can connect it to your different systems. So you can connect to like email, Google Drive, Slack, and it has integrations with other tools like Gamma, lots of other tools. And then you can effectively, like anyone on the team in a low code way, can kind of create agents where you effectively prompt the types of outcomes that you want when you invoke it. And it's so, for example, for us, somebody might ask, like, one of the first examples we looked at was just like our IT kind of policy or security protocol. And so we could just be like, hey, is this, customer has this question, can we, is this permissible based on what they're asking or whatever? And it would be like, oh, yeah, there's a Slack thread for another customer over here where we said yes. Here's the link, whatever. And it's just really efficiently like indexes all your content and allows you to query across it. Well, even like our sales leaders will use it and be like, can you look at a bunch of our like it connects to Gong. So can you look at a bunch of our first calls? It comes with like 3 good examples of calls based on this criteria where we did discovering this way. And it'll be like, yep. And in like 5 seconds, it's like, yep, here it is.
Is Dust I mean, I have not used it, but I've now talked to a bunch of operators that have. I don't know if you know what Glean is, but is Dust just like a poor man's Glean?
I think it's a rich man's Glean.
Ah, okay.
What I understand of the so like Glean, I feel is I haven't used it, but I feel like the onboarding like Glean. I mean, I shouldn't speak out of place. I haven't used it. Dust is like super lightweight and it's like a per seat model. So when I got it, it was like, I don't know, some like 20-30 bucks a month. For me, I got it for like me and 3 other people. We just started adding connectors. Over time, as you grow usage of it, you can get an enterprise plan, which gets you access to other connectors like Salesforce and stuff. But like the PLG version of it is really powerful. So we were able to kind of test it and just get it going. And Glean, in my understanding, is like you have to do a lot more upfront work to kind of get it set up.
Yeah, what I've heard a lot is from people who are using it is, "Hey, I can build something single player mode in Claude Code,
Mm-hmm.
but if I wanted to let my reps use it, there's no way they're gonna
Bingo.
auth into everything and do that." So it's almost a way to, like, build the agent and then make it democratized for every rep.
Bingo. Yeah, I built a deal desk bot on like a Thursday afternoon in like 15 minutes where I just described like, hey, here's the pricing structure. These are the things that I want to know. If any deal has any of these things, here's the threshold, flag to me. And then like a rep can just at deal desk bot, throw an order form in, and it'll just be like, yeah, no problem. Or these are the critical things I want to flag. But the important thing is like, I did that without writing any code in a very short, literally like 15 to 20 minutes. You can spin something, and every rep can now invoke it.
That is powerful. So Noah's leading our whole podcast series on agentic sales, right? Where we've interviewed people like an 11x or something like that, or relevance, where they're building agents, but those agents are going outbound. They're learning. They're doing that. I don't imagine you can build that stuff on Dust, right? This is more like mostly internal agents for is Dust. Is that a fair way to say it?
You know, it's a good question. I don't think it's necessarily designed for like an external thing.
Yeah.
We do have like we had an interesting use case. One of the first things that Edgar worked on was a kind of like, I guess, like a support triage mechanism. So we had built a bot for internal use, which was just like, hey, somebody's asking if I've got this question about the product. If I were to want to change this, whatever, how does that change pricing? And he created that, which accessed all of our documentation. So a CSM or an AE could easily ask that question. What we realized is that in our support channels, like, we use like a drift style, we use Pylon, like, interface where people ask questions. We realized it's like a lot of the CSMs are just kind of like playing telephone.
Yeah.
We're like, they're just coming to us. And we're like, and so we built a system that triages those to determine, is this a question that I think I know the answer to? If it is, am I confident in it? If I'm confident in it, I'll answer it. If I'm not confident in it, I'll flag it to the CSM. And if I don't know the answer, then I'll flag to the CSM. And that deflected like 70% of inquiries. And so it's like I don't know that we actually I don't know that we expose like Dust externally, but we use it as a tool heavily from our support teams. Or we actually have like a support team dedicated to answer those types of questions. And then we have our CSMs. So I think that, you can kind of design it to work however you want, but yeah, probably not as a main use case.
What other tools do you have in your tech stack today? Just curious.
We use for what kind of use cases? I mean, we got all sorts of things.
More on the go to market. So if you're thinking about, you have, because what we're finding in a lot of the conversations is there's a lot of overlap with some of the technologies in terms of there's a lot of commoditized capabilities that are basically just one level above what a GTM engineer could probably build themselves on Claude, just maybe a little bit nicer interface. And a lot of the vendors are now starting to overlap these capabilities. So they're offering to do these sort of bits here and there. So just curious kind of what the broad main pillars of the go-to-market stack that you use today. And like, if you're using Dust to kind of fill in the blanks and make some of these connections, what are those main pillars that you're leveraging?
So yeah, I guess what I would say is like the most powerful tools are the infrastructure layer. And
Yep.
then, that's how I think about what Dust kind of blends the infrastructure and application layer, but like heavily use Snowflake, like heavily use like Airbyte to sync Salesforce data to Snowflake, Gong data to Snowflake. And I think having a single source of truth allows us to be very dangerous with the go-to-market engineering team, starting to build application layer. And then like we have like a tool, it's like a surface area for our account executives and engagement managers that we call Profound Profit. It's just a homegrown tool, but it relies on that infrastructure that we built.
Oh.
And so we can we can create very, using Claude Code, we can very easily build different UX experience that's all based on underlying infrastructure to be able to like do pre-call briefing, to do post-call follow-ups, to recognize which are the highest risk accounts in my book, to do a lot of things that I think you would have bought applications for just a couple of years ago or a couple of months ago. But we really like, I told my team heavily, like we buy infra, we build application. That's the bias that I have.
That's the exact same. Kyle Norton says similar approach on that side.
Yeah.
I always say to people, if you don't have your data stack in place, which you just talked about with the Snowflake side of things, you shouldn't start to try to just do a bunch of magical GTM engineering stuff because you're going to struggle. Like, how do you think about what was the data stack like when you got there? Was it already mature? Did you have to mature it? And how critical? What 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 makes that data stack work for you?
Yeah. I mean, you could like just to say that like we use Snowflake, is so overly simplified.
Yeah.
Uh, the I would say the improvements that we've made are by hiring people who can help build backend infrastructure for us. Like, for example, you can use a tool like Dust to parse through, um, for example, we use Hex. We use Hex on top of Snowflake for, dashboarding, analysis reporting. We have a Hex MCP that can access, so you can access Hex via Dust or Claude. Um, and there's a lot of analysis that we can do based on the data that lives in Snowflake. But in order to do that, there's a lot of like pre-processing of transcripts that you have to do first.
Yep.
So like we really had to, as you're thinking about, I think this goes back to the concept of what is a GTM engineer. And there's actually like a whole narrative to talk about of like, it's just software engineering. I think like it started as like a RevOps person who was like a little technically leaned or curious in that sense. But, and a lot of those people can be good at like doing the outbound use cases, but for like core infra use cases that make you like really dangerous, you kind of have to go and just hire or bring in software engineers. I know a lot of companies have had success rotating. Like at MongoDB, I ran the sales tool function, and we just rotated our SAs who are curious into this team. And because MongoDB was a technical company, they were engineers, and I know like Vercel has done that. But yeah, the profile of people that you look for in a go-to-market engineer, I think is very tricky
Yeah.
because it could be somebody who is technically curious and has kind of used Claude Code or whatever, but like, how well do they know how to use like Git? Like, how comfortable are they with like version control and accessing, all of our repos and like actually organizing code and shipping and
That's my money question now. It used to be, can you pull your own data 3 years ago?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now it was, do you what's your GitHub account and
Yeah,
tell
yeah,
me
yeah.
how you use it. Like that's my proxy for this stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's a spectrum of people depending on use case, but in order to do the things that we're doing, you have to have people who can be actually building backend infra.
I love that.
What is the team size? What is that team size that you have?
Right now we have 4 people,
Okay.
um, but like I'm, it's generally in this kind of a growth mode. It's very bizarre to try to do headcount planning because the only comps I have are like, okay, well, it's the sales team is this size, so like 10% of the sales team. Like, how big should the ops team be? If you want to, 5x the size of the sales team in 1 year, you have to figure out how do you make things not break and what kind of investment do I need. So I think we need a lot more good market engineers.
Well, I mean, we're getting this question a lot, so I kind of want to dig in on this because I think that's where
Yeah.
people have the same challenges. So, roughly, what's the size of your broader remit team that you have? Because people are asking, like, what's that startup layer look like? I know that I mean, to go from 30 to 100, like, that is a massive challenge on the sales side to find the right sort of people in the right place and the timing. That's like a horrendous hurdle to jump through. But what's kind of what does the team look like today? What did it look like when you started 9 months ago? I think this is what there's a lot of
Sure.
interest in. How do I think about what my org looks like relative to what other people are doing?
Yeah. So I think the way I have to answer that question is like, this is very rooted in what outcome are you trying to drive for the company and what your position you're in. So our high level, every decision that we make, we do things that are very, if you read all the traditional books or whatever, a lot of the things that we do would be considered wrong. But like the guiding principle of the world that we're in with Profound, and I think a lot of other AI native companies are AI has done 2 things. One is created large markets relatively overnight that are greenfield, and it's also reduced the costs to produce software to become pretty marginal. And the time that
Mhm.
it takes to produce software is pretty marginal. So you now have like a billion dudes in their garage with Claude code attacking you from every direction. So, like traditionally, there's always been like these like, how does that relate to go-to-market ops or rev ops or sales ops or whatever? You, I'm sure you guys know there's like traditional like thresholds. You have this many salespeople or whatever, and the intention of that is to optimize. Like this is a cost center, sales is a revenue center, and you want to balance those in order to get the optimal economics for your company. It in the world that we live in, it's a land grab moment, and so we're staffed up a lot more on ops and systems than I think a lot of people would expect, or that would seem maybe prudent. So, but you can't
We might
5
disagree with you, but keep going.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't 5x the size of your sales team with like one Salesforce admin. Like you can't go from
Right. Yeah,
from
yeah.
like 10 million to 150 million in a couple months and be like, oh yeah, we did it all with one guy. Like it's not
As
going to work. So
yeah,
I always when I see these CEOs say, "Hey, AI's here, we're gonna cut everyone 20%." I'm like,
no,
literally, you're gonna
the
cut the
opposite is
RevOps,
happening.
and that would be the one team that it will give you the ability to cut all the other teams by another 5%.
Yeah.
James, one question I have for you, I always coach. This is how I coach a lot of CROs. They're like, "Oh, I'm just gonna like have the RevOps team do it, and like we'll just have them do it as kind of part of the thing." I've always said like I think in terms of run the business, like shipping territories, making comp plans, and all that stuff work, which the team still needs to do. And then there's the change the business, right? Which is go make individual functions more efficient, pull things out. Like if you look at those four people you've got, are they just purely change the business type people rather than run the business and like driving efficiencies? Or do they end up like maintaining their own code and software and things like that? Like, how do you balance that concept with these guys or gals?
So it very much started as change the business and it's rapidly becoming run the business.
Because it's like you've gotta maintain your code and make
Because
sure.
yeah, process moves over to become dependent on you start it and you're like, hey, there's this new system, and you optionally can go into this tool for your pre-call prep, and that optional thing becomes the default, which becomes over time mission critical to some extent. And now it's a problem when it's down. It's a problem if you're timing out, not gonna. It becomes a problem, and so now this is becomes the business.
Presumably, you are taking your core RevOps team and either making them more efficient or redundancy. Like, I was talking to another top person in New York that has delayered their RevOps team and taken some of those headcount from RevOps and shifted them over into GTM Eng, or gotten rid of them and hired the right people for that. Are you kind of over time seeing that the balance of tons of RevOps enablement people to much more systems people, is that the way your team will evolve, or how do you think about that?
I think the short answer to that question is yes. The longer answer is the distinction, I think, between go-to-market engineering and other roles will start to blur.
Yeah.
So we just hired a guy who I remember I met this guy, his name's Papa, he's awesome. And I was like, this guy could be a go-to-market engineer, but he's also like Salesforce certified. He's like deep in Salesforce, but he's also ripping apps in Cursor. And
Yep.
I'm like, I could see him kind of going either way. And that's honestly the profile that I want everyone to be. And so I think it's like over time, it's just the people who are doing ops, it's maybe that the outcomes that they're trying to drive are a little bit more specific uh, to, the core use cases of like a RevOps team, but they're doing it. Like, for example, when I was at MongoDB, the bane of my existence was like headcount tracking. How many AEs do you have? Oh my goodness. Well, we've got, this many who are signed, this many on garden leave, this many blah, 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 long-term leave. But like, it was a super hard question to answer. Super hard question to do on our like weekly forecast calls. What's your headcount forecast? Like we had a guy start in a week. He built this tracker in Claude code that integrates with our systems, and we can tell exactly what the hiring plan is, where every manager is against it, how that tracks to our productivity assumptions and goes back to our model. And then I can real time see, are we on track with our headcount plan? And are we going to hit our number? And if we're behind, is it a capacity problem or is it a productivity problem? And like that was a hard question to answer at Mongo. And I just literally I have this up on my other screen right now. I'm literally looking at it. It's like such a beautiful thing. It was like, like a couple days worth of work to set up.
That's a perfect example of what we all want. Like, the jobs will change, and I look at a lot of the GTM strategy in particular, right? Like, planning territories, balancing. AI seems to be phenomenal at a lot of that stuff as well, too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there is a danger, I would say, in getting carried away with it.
Mhm.
And I have to say that like I've become I like never tweet anymore, but I tweeted this yesterday. I've become like allergic to the Claude font. I don't know if you guys are taught like somebody
Yes.
sends you like a slide or like a memo. It's kind of these blocks, colored blocks. It's like Claude has this kind of format. And if I ask somebody like, hey, can you send me over a summary of this thing? They send me that. And I'm like, I just see it and I know this probably is going to be like 70% right, but not 100%. Because you kind of just ask Claude to summarize like your slacks for this topic, or and it's so it's worth saying, like, as a leader, to anyone who's listening, who's like, wanting to do a good job, like, please review the things that you build in Claude.
This may also be the semantic layer. I just introduced Noah to these guys at Vasco that are doing really cool stuff, which is like reading everything, and then AI can now start to build your semantic layer because it's like pipeline or
Mm.
close rate or win rate. There's multiple ways to
Oh,
calculate that,
yeah.
and so the ability to have that semantic layer in there. Do you guys have that already?
So yeah, there's I think like two interesting things I can talk about. One is just like the querying semantic layer, and then the two is like our Claude code repository.
Mhm.
So just in that order, so we use Snowflake just to query data, and traditionally you might just query the data warehouse. You might push that data into like a Tableau or something. The semantic layer is important, and so the descriptions, like, you basically have markdown files that describe all of like the canonical metrics and tables. And so as you query it semantically, I can just now ask, like, I actually don't even really endeavor or bother to have like, I used to have all these like dashboards that were like really consistent. Like, if I want a metric, I just literally go to Claude, like, oh, what was our close rate on this? And it just tells me, oh, okay. I like spend a way less time looking at visuals on things and way more time semantically, like, hey, what was the highest productivity AE last month? It'll just tell me. All right, cool. So that's one thing, and that's super important to get done correctly. And the other thing is, uh, we have one of our go-to-market engineers, Ayush, is working. He's got a Claude Code repository of skills, and we actually use Notion for this because Cowork can access Notion. And so he basically has centralized the process of documenting, hey, this is our pre-call research skill, or this is our whatever skill, or follow-up email skill. And we can update that and fine-tune it in a centralized place, and then reps can just invoke it locally as they're doing their job. And
Hmm.
so it's kind of another version of the semantic layer. You can use GitHub for this, obviously, which is good for version control, but just to make it like easy and accessible for people, we use Notion, and it works great.
If I were to think about the typical grouping of a go-to-market ops team, you have kind of the
Hmm.
planning, the business partner folks that are partnering with some of the folks on the field. You have the tech and the technical team that's usually the go-to-market tools. And then you have that data set crew. If I were to, those are generally the three major pillars. Do you have something similar set up where that tech team has just evolved from running the go-to-market tech stack to being more go-to-market engineers to be that combo where AI is just another element in that go-to-market tech stack, and how you drive at what you're trying to deliver is now, to your earlier point in the very beginning of this conversation, is we can now do it, which is we couldn't do it, 5 years ago. These capabilities were just missing, but now we're able to kind of do that last mile of technology to make the company actually hum. Is that how like, how do you group your team to make sure that they're all working very effectively together and that you have that symbiosis of, I really understand how the business works, and I also starting to understand how we need to build out the infrastructure, which is often the blocker where you have to have multiple points of view and multiple experiences in place. So how do you manage that, and what does your team look like to deliver on that?
You want to optimize towards getting the most value out of your data. And so the way I think about the groupings there, like traditional groupings, I agree. That's how we had it at MongoDB. I basically have like two teams that are considered go-to-market ops. There's like systems and data, and then there's like analytics, analytics and planning, basically. And the thread between them is kind of go-to-market. Systems is really the foundation of everything. Like, the go-to-market engineers are working on top of data produced by the systems.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
that really is like the foundation. But the go-to-market engineers are kind of like a connective tissue as well between all of those functions. So from a systems perspective, maybe we're doing like some sort of territory planning exercise and we're using tools that they built. From a planning perspective, we're using other tools. But like, I think a lot of the roles that are more traditional, like, we don't have a business partner role. That's the type of, like, I would rather have more go-to-market engineering than people who are, like, pulling spreadsheets and reports for sales VPs.
I think the business partner role goes away if you give
Yeah.
them the ability to query their own data.
Yeah.
But I still think it's maybe like that AI transformation group is periodically leaning in. It's not like I think a lot of times business partners are like, oh, this sucks, and they just talk to people. But I love the idea that you're getting rid of the business partners or the field ops, and you're more focused on like how do I make you more efficient. And again, I think if you can do that plus give them access to data and teach them how to use it, you almost don't need a business partner role
Yeah,
anymore.
I think you can do more than what the business partner could have done on their own. When you
I like yeah, it's like that's almost where you can start to fund your GTM engineering function is out of the business partner type of role.
Yeah, yeah,
What
I
you
think
said you said data was critical. You and I think, met through LEO at ScaleStack.
yeah,
I know ScaleStack, it was a huge power at MongoDB. I use
so
it at Whispered. I'd be curious, like how you do like data enrichment and all of that side for Profound.
we use SkillStack as well. Um, yeah, I think I would say at a high level though, like even just using like Claude has made things like there's a lot of things that I think we just like didn't do at Mongo because we weren't really able to or have the capacity to do that we can do now. Like we can make qualitative uh we can assess accounts or leads in a qualitative way by like running them through Opus and doing deep research with Parallel. It's like everything had to be quantitative to some level, when it came to lead routing or territory scoring, when I was at Mongo. It had to be like, maybe you could look at like the industry and say, okay, this industry is going to go here. But like, otherwise it had to be like, okay, well, what's the number of employees or whatever? Whereas now it can kind of be like a little bit more like give the model context and help it understand, like, should this really go to like this team or this team, which is super cool.
I love that. If you had to, I've had the luxury. I've been at two gigantic unicorn, like IPO scale unicorns twice, and then two I've taken up from like small to big. I feel like I don't know what stage you joined Profound recently, and it's been growing so fast. But are there mistakes that you've made in the GTM stack that you would redo if you could do it over again?
Nothing has bitten me too bad yet, but I do maybe a couple of things I would say. One is I wonder like if some of these legacy tools will be able to keep pace with some of the newer tools. And
Yes.
so we're like, we're talking to Gong now about like renewal. I'm like, you guys are really expensive, and like you guys changed a lot on your product. So like, I'm like, is this? I, I'm confronted with some of these thoughts. A lot of like, there's got to be like something better, and that's one thing. But I mean, I will say also like my first day at Profound, we were on HubSpot on like a free, using like a free instance for startups. And day one, like literally day one, they turned it off. They're like, "Oh, you're at your limit."
Hmm.
And I called the rep. I was like, "Dude, it's my first day here. Like, you guys gotta turn this back on. Like, figure it out." And he was like, "We this like you literally can sign a contract, or there's nothing we can do." And I was like, "Okay." In the back of my head, I said, "I'm switching
I'm killing you in a year, right?
as
Yeah.
soon as possible."
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 3 months, I switched to Salesforce. They bought us out of our contract. But yeah, I mean, I think like it was definitely painful moving CRMs, but I think that we did it in a phase where we were small enough and nimble enough that like the pain was limited. I think if we were gonna do that at like 150, 300 million ARR, that would be really painful. And so I'm glad that we bit the bullet on that, but I think that would be one that would really bite me in the butt.
By the way, I'm so much. I have a couple data vendors where like, I'm signing that 15% increase through the skin of my teeth, but I am going to fucking rip you out next year.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. You know it
like
when you sign it, you're like, well, this will be temporary.
so going back maybe to the gong thing, right? Like I think you said, and I tend to agree, buy infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
build applications. Gong
Mm-hmm.
is an application. And again,
Yeah, sure.
we can always go off the record on some of this stuff, but it's like Gong is an application. You hear every day, and Udi even had that fun post of like, I know you could vibe code Gong, but like it's not going to be very good. And if you set your team up to build a version of it, that would probably be like all four of those people for a fairly long time. Like, how do you weight that buy versus build trade-off for what is something that we could probably build, but we probably wouldn't build it as good, and then it becomes like you're effectively a product dev org for this type of core infrastructure system.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's definitely like a lot of truth to like I'm not gonna try to vibe code a Salesforce. I'm not going to try to vibe code complex pieces of software. It's just not worth it. And it would be really myopic to try to invest. I mean, and there's a whole talk track here around the cost of maintenance. Like vibe coding doesn't mean that you don't have to maintain things. If anything, it means you probably have to maintain it a lot more than you think, because as the
Yeah.
use cases evolve over time, just the infrastructure that you've built is not going to scale. I would say for Gong specifically, Gong does three things, right? It does call analysis, I guess, coaching, does forecasting, and it does whatever outreach sequencing stuff. But maybe they have more stuff now. For the call thing, I treat it honestly as infrastructure. It's like, to me, it's like a transcription tool, and we just push, like, we do a lot of the work, and a lot of the value that we get out of it is on the call post processing.
But you could do that with Zoom, right? Like, you could just have a Zoom
Yeah,
recorder or something like that.
yeah. I think about it. I'm like, as an application, what do I really use it for? I mean, yeah, it's useful. Like, I have new hires like watching the call, but they're just like watching the call. So it's like, in the context of like, you can't rebuild a Gong. It's like, yeah, I'm sure I probably don't want to do that, but
Well, it's the insights that you're extracting too. It's like what was the good part of the call? What are the reps missing in the calls? Are they good at the discovery questions? Are they missing
Gong is not good at that.
right? And so that's that other layer, the extracting out, which I think is the really that's the meat. That's the part that's like, yeah, that's what you want, which I think everyone's somewhat struggling with. But that's what I want. So like somebody comes to me with that, like that's what I'm gonna buy that straight out.
I'm basically waiting for a tool. Maybe somebody is actually doing this, and if someone is, just reach out to me. But it's like, I have this something, this idea really excites me. I just have no time to work on it, but I would love to do it. Of like creating an open source library for understanding like B2B call excellence that can both classify the type of interaction and then give like coaching. Because like out of the box, like Gong is fundamentally a sales tool. And there's different types of sales processes. And what Snowflake does and what Profound does and what Ramp does are all going to be different. But there's got to be like something that where they can be a little bit more proactive about, like, that is now fully delegated to me and my team, which I think is a fun project to work on.
But the funny thing is it's actually got a lot of commonalities. James, to your point on open source GTM modules,
Yeah.
stay tuned. GTM
Okay.
Council having a lot of fun. We'll talk to you about that. But yes, if you think about it, the ability to like analyze the call, extract insights, put in key terms, do that stuff, like that should just be a module that you could build and put it on top of your Snowflake and be able to like analyze it for you on that
But
stuff.
it's also your ICP, right? You have all these live conversations with potential customers or customers that should be helping you define and going back to product marketing and going back to product and like all that. There's so much gold in those calls and the transcripts and the emails. Um, what one other question? This is the question I forgot, which was you'd mentioned your aversion to like the Claude font. My
Yeah.
similar element to that is dashboards when I'm trying to understand data. But my
Mm,
core metrics, when I used to join a company, I would kind of have that dashboard that you'd build out. These are the core metrics of how I look at the business and the health of the business. As your core metrics, the headline things that you look to track the success of the business, has that evolved or changed over the last year or two as you've gotten into the capability of finding a much more data sets and extracting the insights out of that? Do you still go back to win rate, sales cycle, ASP, pipeline? Are those still your same North Stars, or have you extrapolated some other, nuanced version of that?
the metrics that you would expect to be important are important.
Yep.
The thing that's tricky is the pace that things change. So like, just directionally, like, we are now 5 times as big in an ARR basis as we were when I joined 9 months ago. We are, as a company, we were maybe like 60 people. We're 200 now in the last 9 months. Like, we ended the year like 10 or 15 AEs. We got double that. We like, so just looking at like the things that I would have been looking at in December are not the things I'm looking at today. And that makes it a annoying and frustrating process of trying to like do BI in a very fast iterative process. And like, oh, of course, we're looking at win rates. We're looking at sales cycle times. We're looking at average, the average land size. But like rep productivity is like the way that I was looking at it, a couple months ago is like very different than I'm thinking about it now. The way I'm thinking about ramp now is very different than it was a couple months ago. So it's really awesome to be able to semantically engage with your data. And like I do it like literally it's like my Friday night is me like watching a movie and like I've got Cowork open and I'm like just like going crazy. Just like trying to understand like what's going on. Uh so yeah, I think that's the thing about like hypergrowth is like things just aren't very static. And so you have to be thinking a lot about how to measure the business. It changes quickly.
Dude, I love this. We could probably go for another hour. I feel like maybe to wrap it up in the spirit of the cactus that someone sent you that was impactful.
Yeah.
Noah and I have we're working on a partnership with Sendosa where they let us send you awesome jackets with GTM Council on it. So look out as soon as I get that thing turned
Cool.
live. We'll send that to you. And thank you for the time today, James. It
Yeah,
it
of
was
course.
Thank you, James. Yeah. Good
Thanks,
feedback.
guys. Appreciate it.